Hi, this is Jeff Curto, and welcome to episode number 166 of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography. So, as I've gone along in my career as a photographer, my career as a photo teacher, I've learned more and more about and become more interested in the notion of telling stories with pictures. And in fact, one of the watchwords I think that we can see in contemporary photography, especially contemporary online photography, is the idea of a story. And in fact, the workshops that I've been teaching in Italy for years now are centered around the idea of telling a story with photographs, using that experience of being in someplace new or someplace that you're familiar with, and trying to use photography to tell the story of that place and give the essence of what that place may have felt like to you, may have been like while you were there. And what's interesting about our contemporary time is that there are an awful lot of ways to tell stories with pictures and to relate pictures to one another in such a way that they tell a different kind of story than they may have told as single images. And I wanted to share a few of these alternate sharing of images ideas with you. And we've talked a little bit about some of these over the last couple of years in Camera Position, but some new things have come on my radar screen that I think are pretty interesting, and a couple of them have to do with things that some listeners have been up to as well. So I thought I would just sort of walk through a few of these things and show you what's going on with some ideas. So one of them, and perhaps one of the simplest ones to accomplish, not that what listener David Crow has accomplished is simple, is the idea of starting a Flickr group around a theme. Now, of course, there are lots and lots of Flickr groups, and I'm not here to suggest that David Crow's Flickr group of boulders is the end-all, be-all of all the Flickr groups, but I'm really intrigued by the notion of it. So let me just give you a little nugget about where listener David Crow, podcast listener David Crow, came up with this. He wrote to me and he said, in a recent episode, you made a quote about rocks, and he thinks it was from Edward Weston, and I'm pretty sure that's right. Something about how a photograph of a rock can be more than just a rock. And he goes on to say, I've been curating a Flickr group called Boulders. It was a bit of an experiment in social networks. When I started it, it had one awful, in his words, photo of a boulder. Go to the oldest photo to see it, it's still there. But I wondered, how could the group on Flickr called Boulders be a big void? In other words, he hadn't found any other pictures of rocks. So I promoted it a little, and I've accumulated a lot of amazing photographs of rocks that are more than just rocks. And I'll link you to this Flickr group pool, flickr.com/group/boulders/pool. And I'm now a member of it. And of course, those of you who know some of my work know that I've been photographing rocks on and off for a long time. I suspect many of us have. So go check this out and go take a look at what's happened once you begin to link images in a thematic way, like David Crow has with his Flickr group, Boulders. So that in and of itself is a really interesting way to begin to tell a story and to begin to use that notion of pictures that have a common theme or a common idea. So let's move on to another one, and this will require a little bit of razzmatazz on your part to kind of get yourself to this, but a listener named Chris Bonney, somebody that I don't know physically, but know through the podcast and through the social media world, Chris periodically sends out a PDF of his imagery. And not long ago, he sent me a PDF of some photographs he'd made at Cannon Beach in Oregon First of all, they're beautiful photographs, but secondly, I'm really intrigued by the notion of using the PDF format to distribute images in a way that makes it possible for Chris to show me the pictures that he's interested in and interested in having me see, but at the same time, being able to control the way in which I see them. So I have to scroll through the PDF in a particular way, and I know that many of you look at and listen to Brooks Jensen and his podcast and his magazine Lenswork, and he has promoted the idea of PDF format for a long time as well as a number of alternate image distribution methods that I think are pretty interesting. So that also is a pretty interesting thing. And take a look at the PDF. Again, I will link to it and David Crow's Flickr group right on my cameraposition.com blog page, as well as in the app for those of you who are listening in the Camera Position app. And thanks again for those of you who are listening on the app. I appreciate it. And let me know how you like that app, because I don't develop it. I just had an opportunity to have an app, and it's kind of neat to be able to have some alternate content available on your iOS or Android device. So a last thing that I wanted to talk about, or actually a last couple of things, are some methods of sharing imagery that perhaps you've looked at, perhaps not, of visual storytelling applications. Most of these started out as something that were objects or apps that were available on the iPad or on the iPhone, or in some cases on the Android platform, but what they've developed into are more full-featured visual storytelling applications. And I've played around with several of them. One of them that I played around with a little bit was Storehouse, and I found Storehouse to be really interesting. I'll link to it, but I'm also kind of, I have to admit, a little disappointed because a few versions of the app ago, they changed the way they dealt with the app, and instead of having something that where I could follow a bunch of other like-minded storytellers on this app, they've kind of, I think, kind of dumbed it down, which has caused me to jump over to My Album. My Album is a really interesting storytelling platform, and what's interesting is that it's available on the phone, on the iPad, and also on the web, and all for free, allowing you to upload your images and create stories that have text as well as images, and to slightly animate the images a little bit, all in a really simple to use, easy to use format. Another one that I've been playing with a little bit is Adobe's Slate application, and I will put links to some stories that I've made, as well as to the sort of root ideas of Slate and My Album, as well as to Storehouse, which is a pretty great platform, but it used to have a kind of Instagram-like strategy of being able to follow other storytellers, and they've kind of removed that and made it something, I think, a little less powerful in that regard. But check these things out. Check out some of the stories that I've made, primarily about Italy and other places that I go and photograph and teach, and see what you think. And I'd be really interested in not only seeing what you think and hearing what you think about these platforms and strategies for distributing your images, but I'd also be interested in seeing the kinds of things that people out there are making. So if you're making stories with PDF, or if you have a really interesting Flickr group that I don't know about, or if you are using one of these visual storytelling platforms, send me a link to what it is that you've got going on, and I'd really like to see it. You might want to share it also on the Facebook presence for Camera Position, and I'll link to that also in the app and on the website as well. So this way that we have of sharing not just individual images on the web, but stories, complete ideas, fleshed out notions using a series of pictures, or in the case of one of these Flickr groups, a series of pictures that really weren't intended to go together to begin with, but because they are now together, begin to tell us a story of a certain idea, a certain concept. So check it out, see what you think, and let me know what you're up to with it. Last thing I wanted to mention here is that registration is now open here in mid-November for next year's Italy photography workshops. I don't spend too much time on this podcast talking about the workshops, but I will note that they are now open for registration. A couple of them are full or nearly full. So if you're interested in joining me to photograph in Rome or Tuscany or the southern province of Puglia in Italy in June of 2016, go take a look at photographitaly.com. And boy, would it be great to meet up with some other camera position listeners, which often make up a large part of my workshop attendees anyway. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Camera Position, the podcast about the creative side of photography.